Climate change is shaping today's world, and as a result, the automotive industry too is undergoing a game-changing technological transformation from ICE to EVs. Now, environmental concerns like urban air and noise pollution are driving further demand for electric vehicles. And despite some regional variances, the overall global push towards electric vehicles is gaining massive momentum as more and more consumers see environmental impact as a personal responsibility. Hello and welcome to our very special panel discussion episode. Volvo presents Reversing the Damage, Charting India's EV Journey, partnered by ET Now. And to speak to us on the rise of electric vehicles, we have with us a panel of eminent experts. Allow me to introduce them. First up, we have the Director General of the Energy and Resources Institute, Dr. Vibha Dhawan. We have joining us from our Mumbai studio, Partner Sustainability and ESG at EY India, Nitesh Mehrotra. And also we have with us the Managing Director of Volvo Cars India, Jyoti Malhotra. Thank you so much, all panelists, for joining us. Mr. Malhotra, let me start with you, and I will play a bit of the devil's advocate, because from years, centuries, humans have been using ICEs for personal mobility. And now that we're talking about shifting to EVs, do you think that this, the ecological benefits of this shift, would that really outweigh the massive cost implication of the same?
Yeah, so I think just taking cue from what you just said, IC engines have been around forever, right? Maybe more than 100 years, and electric technology is also available from the very beginning. But IC engines were supposed to be believed to be much more efficient at that point of time, and hence we, as a community, as countries, as companies, decided to go the IC route. Over the years, the efficiency of IC engines have been improving, but probably they have reached their peak. There is hardly anything you can do about it now. So that's one part. The second part is, we talk about climate change all the time. I think it is there for us to see. We looked at Dubai getting floods, Delhi getting temperatures beyond 50 degrees, and we are seeing so many events around us. So we need to do something about it as an industry, and hence electric cars are the best possible solution, because electric cars are best when it comes to the impact on the climate. And hence, when you look at the cost benefit, right, there is a short-term cost of bringing this change versus a long-term benefit. I think it's better to invest in it now. And having said that, this change will not happen over suddenly. It's going to be gradual. And even if, let's say, by 2030 in India, we get to a 30% penetration of electric cars, the number of electric cars, even at that point of time, out of the total park car, is going to be still much lesser. And hence, it is worthwhile that we invest in it now and bring about this change so that we can reverse the damage to the climate that we have done.
And very much required in a way. Nitesh, I'll come to you now. So, given that OEMs and consumers alike are now growing conscious about climate change, there's more and more talk about that. But what about the reality of making the change? Because, see, one concern is that in India, we talk about the last mile accessibility to even basic infrastructure like electricity in certain areas is not there. So what's your sense? Do you think EVs can be adopted all throughout the country?
So, Sumit, I think if I may, just building on to what Jyoti said, right? I think in our fight against climate change, obviously, I think electrifying transportation is a very critical goal that we need to achieve. And I think getting to, zero tailpipe emissions is critical. But I think in addition to climate change, there are also 3 E's that, the consumers and the entire viewers need to keep in mind. And I think those 3's, as I say, one is the environmental pollution. We all know some of the, highly polluted cities in the world are in India at the moment, and with our growth, that's going to get worse. I think second is a little bit on our energy security, right, and a dependence on fossil fuels. And the third, I think very important, is the economic sustainability, right? And I think we all know the industry estimates a $100 billion opportunity for the country, and obviously it's also predicated in Make in India and the Industry 4.0 and others, right? So obviously a very critical, opportunity for us that we need to be working on as an entire ecosystem. Now, coming, Sumit, to your point on the challenges, I think there are various structural challenges that we need to address to spur demand, as to what Jyoti alluded to. I think the most important that we are seeing is certainly achieving purchase price parity of EV vehicles against ICE. We all know, I think there is an upfront premium that the consumer need to pay, and I think obviously lots been predicated on the battery cost, right, which is somewhere around 35 to 50%. So what do we do to address that? The battery cost has to come down, and also, obviously solutions like battery as a service, I think could be assessed and see whether that will work in India environment or not. And then I think on the challenges front, there are others, right? There is range anxiety, as we know. Related to that is obviously the whole charging infrastructure. Is that enough in the country? And then also a little bit on friction with the financing of the EVs. So I think those are the challenges. I think coming to your point on right now, the demand for EVs is more in metro and tier 1 cities. But as we move along and get to double-digit penetration in the years to come, I think the entire electrification, the grid connectivity, all of that will come to play. But right now, that's not the big hurdle, as I said. So there are other structural challenges that we need to address at the moment.
Thank you for that, Nitesh. Ma'am, just if you want to weigh in on the similar point, what would be your thoughts on this? Because when electricity is most important for electric vehicles, then there is a shortage around the country. So how do we balance this?
Well, the points which we have discussed, like first of all, that for such a long time, we are dependent on ICT engines and so on. What we have to look into, first of all, the climate change, which a decade before we said it's a threat. Today we know it's a reality. Look at Delhi. Like we had 50 degrees kind of temperatures for over 1.5 months. Look at the number of cars on the road. That number is increasing. The single reason is that there are too much of emissions. Right. Any activity, it can be construction, it can be vehicles, but vehicles contribute one of the largest component. The total share of vehicles is very large. And that is why we are moving towards what are the alternatives. We are not going to go back to the Stone Age, we are going to run vehicles. So there are two things. One is looking at fuel efficiency in every car, and the other is other alternatives to fossil fuel. Now, electric cars is the best possible option today. Two reasons. One, of course, is because, as rightly said, the emissions are lowest. The second part is that electricity can be generated by renewables. Yes. The green energy is possible. Also, the importance of this particular technology to a country like India is that we import every single drop of fossil fuel. And therefore, the cost of fossil fuels, petrol, diesel in India is far higher than in many other countries. On the other hand, if you look at solar, we are blessed with solar energy. And therefore, the cost of solar energy production in our country is much lower than in many other countries of the West. You also talked about that what happens to the far-off places. Isn't it decentralized energy generation the answer? And we are moving in that direction because if we look at our villages, they have plenty of land, plenty of sunshine, and therefore they can produce energy themselves, electric energy or solar energy, which then can be converted into electric.
Right.
And that can be used whether it is for their tractors. I'm not just talking of cars, I'm also looking at energy usage in agriculture sector. So that can come from there. So therefore it has enormous potential.
That's a very interesting point, ma'am. We'll come back to that, but Mr. Malhotra, I just wanting to get you back in the discussion. Now, one concern also is technology. So, yes, change from ICE to EVs, there's a change of technology, but within EVs also there is constant technological upgradation. In such a case, stuff like solid state battery advancements, how can these things help propel mass adoption? Because again, the biggest conversation is always about the battery, because that is what is powering that car. So what is your view on that?
Okay, so I think going back to the point from where you started, I think we as humans have been using IC engines for last 100 years, right? And we are used to it, operate them in a particular way. And I think IC engines have now evolved over the years and has come to a stage where I think we are at the best possible efficiency now. I think if you really compare now different cars, I think it's hardly any difference. As far as EVs are concerned, we are just getting started. Hence, I think we are at a point where it's already very efficient. One data point is that when it comes to, let's say, energy efficiency, what it generates per sort of gram or whatever, it is electric is, I think there is a much less loss of energy. So the lithium iron is quite efficient, but as I said, it's just getting started. From here, the technology is further evolve. And obviously, I think solid state batteries, as we call it, SSBs, they are going to play a very important role. Because as we just heard, people talk about range anxiety as one thing. So it comes from two parts. One part that when you go from point A to point B, what is the total range available? So if you go to from here to Chandigarh, which is 250 kilometers, and if your range is 500, that anxiety will not bother you. But if you have to really go farther, 500, 600 kilometers, then you start thinking about it. But it's also a human, on the other side, it's also a human psychology, what is called as the fear of the unknown. Because right now, very few people own them. So you tend to hear different things from different people. And you don't really know what is the reality. So I think the problem lies in energy density. And SSBs will be able to give you longer range with a much lighter battery. They use, I think as the name says, solid electrolytes rather than liquid electrolytes. So they are much more efficient, much more dense, and hence it sort of solves a lot of these challenges which we are talking about, whether it is about the range, whether it is about, I would say, making the vehicles lighter and hence even more efficient. So I think that is one part. Then the other issue is we talk about also disposable of these batteries. The solid state batteries itself use much less, I would say, toxic materials, and also use materials which are abundantly available. So technology will play its role, but the best part is that EV technology is just starting, and it has a huge space to improve and improve further to get to best possible efficiencies.
Nitesh, I'll just come to you on one point. This is something where the government of India has also taken many steps to promote EVs, both through policy and consumer awareness. But you know, when it comes to building up of infrastructure such as charging stations, wanting your thoughts, how can private enterprises profitably build out the necessary charging infrastructure? Because, you know, like what Jyoti spoke about range anxiety, if I know that, hey, I'm going from A to B point and on the way there will be 3 charging stations that I can stop and recharge my car, then I'm happier to, or I'm more at ease.
So Sumit, I think adding to your earlier point on, we need to look at the entire ecosystem, right? And I think Jyoti alluded to that as well. I think in our, we at EY have done extensive research on what we call EY value pool ecosystem. And in our analysis, there are 9 distinct interdependent ecosystems that we need to be working through. And I think a lot's being done. And I think these ecosystems, just to share with the viewers, I think starts with the battery manufacturer, the EV manufacturer, the city planning. I think we talked about the financing that needs to happen, a little bit on the grid connectivity, whether it's renewable or otherwise, that needs to happen. Then the whole digital ecosystem that needs to emerge, and also the ICE, from ICE to EV, distributor model that has to transition. And then last and not the least, certainly the important bit on the end of life, right? What happens to the discarded batteries as we come to that, as the ecosystem evolves. So I think the answer lies is that we need to work on all these 9 ecosystem. How do we mature that? And I think lots being done. I think we are all aware, a lot of incentives being given by the government, whether by the FAME scheme, the EV policies out at the moment. There are a lot of incentives being offered there to have the right policy, I think, framework in the country. Coming to charging station, I think that's being solved. And I would say, in a way, it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg dilemma, right? I think last stats that I saw, there are about 16,000 public charging stations in the country, right, at the moment. And I think if we were to get to our ambition of 30 to 40% penetration, we would need, about 1.3 million charging station, which essentially translates to about 4 lakh charging station annually. I think that's the extent and scale that we are talking to really solve for this. And I think the government through the policy framework is doing a lot. I think the public-private partnership that you alluded to needs to help. The land acquisition, I think we need land, right, for charging station. I think that needs to be enabled and smoothened a little bit. And also then, as Dr. Vibha said, the connectivity to the grid and also to the renewable grid, I think to the extent possible is very, very critical in a distributed structure. So I think that's how the country is solving as we are evolving. But the overall theme, I think from our side, is to look at the entire 9 EV value pool ecosystem and maturing all of them, because all of them are interdependent.
Mr. Malhotra, one important thing that India and many nations around the world have done for combating climate change is, being a part of the Paris Agreement. And India is also a very active supporter, active participant of the same. But so this is from the government point of view. In your view, with the auto industry, you being a key player here in India, what more can the industry do in this space? And more importantly, so this is also coming as a generational shift. So the people in an earlier generation might not shift to EVs. Tomorrow, the generation of tomorrow might be more accepting of EVs. So how are you kind of communicating to them also?
So I think in my mind, as industry, there are 3 things that we really need to do. One is, first of all, I think we need to excite the younger generation that we need to make this change happen, and it is for their good and next generation good, and they are open to that. So creating excitement is one. Obviously, the second level in my view is also eliminating myths. I talked about this is a human habit which we need to change, and we can change this with the second generation. So this is like the second E, as I said, is about eliminating myths, and that can be done through education programs. So we can tie up, we can go to the younger generation who have not yet learned driving, who are going to learn driving. So use them, influence them by educating them, by exciting them, and by eliminating these myths from their minds that it is good for the larger good, for the community, for the country, for the planet. And I think that can make a very big difference. And I think as industry, we need to go with one voice, that something needs to be done, and it is in your own hands. Government will do something, but at individual level, each one of us has to do something. And I think younger generation is much more open. And if we do these 3 E's, I'm sure we can sort of really influence them, and they will come together with us. And today, I think digital media plays a very important role. Overall media, I think that this program that we are doing right now is also a medium through which we can reach out to more audience, even beyond younger generation, people who are any which ways in process of buying cars, not yet bought a car, or they have bought a car which is not yet EV. How do we use the same 3 E's with them also? So I think we have to do a 360 degree, but I think the one important aspect is that as industry, as a community, I think we go with one voice, with one clear message, and I think that will make a very big difference to ensure that we are moving towards the right goals, bringing or reversing the damage, as we are calling it, to the climate, which has already been done over the years. And I think EVs will play an important role. And yes, within that, again, I would say I think hybrids will play a role. There is a bridge from change from ICE to EVs, and I think wherever there is opportunity, even hybrids can play its role. And there are other technologies available. But the first thing is to ensure that we have to make people open to change, that we need to change. What we are doing right now is not correct. And then let each individual, based on the requirement, decide which is the best technology suitable for their requirement. So as a company, we are doing our bit to educate, excite, and eliminate these myths in different ways. And I'm sure, I think small efforts will ultimately build into a bigger voice, and we will be able to make the big change happen.
And what I think also, sir, in your answer, I also want to take one more point, which I feel is also important, is that it's in every individual's hand. So everybody can, if people think it's a small step, इसमें क्या होगा, but every small step does contribute. Nitesh, just coming to you, like we're speaking about the future. So if we have to chart a green mobility roadmap, what, in your opinion, do you think would be some of the significant milestones that we can hope to see? I mean, where do you see the EV industry in India in, say, the next 3 or 5 years, for example?
So Sumit, I would say, I think while EV industry is at a nascent stage, but I think in many sense it's at an inflection point. And I think the opportunity for the country to really pivot to cleaner technologies for all the reasons that we talked about, I think is very important and also a great opportunity for us, right? I think, whether it's the new jobs, whether it's the new technology that we need to imbibe, whether it's also the export strength that we would get from all of that. So I think we are at a great inflection point, and I think the industry, I think Jyoti touched upon a lot of that, all the ecosystem players, including the government, is doing a lot at the moment. But I think, as you said, obviously we need to track the milestones in terms of, are we hitting? I think I talked about the EV value pool ecosystem, that how we are maturing right from the battery manufacturers to the end of life. I think lots work being done. And also, I think the other one, which is very critical, and I think Jyoti touched upon it, is the consumer awareness, right? And a lot of them may not be scientifically articulated, and there could be a lot of myths. I think we need to eliminate that, so that as a growing nation, right? I think, and that's a very, very important bit, that India is growing. Our per capita income is going to grow 6 to 8x in the next 25, 30 years. And I think the demand for the vehicles is going to grow significantly. So I think that's the way we need to track it. The government has a very ambitious plan of getting to 30, 40%. And I think we need to look at milestone in each customer segmentation, right? Obviously, the total cost of ownership, as we call it, I think is positive in many customer segments already. So how do we make the customer aware of that bit? And also, I think any bottlenecks that are there, how do we really eliminate and, I would say, communicate transparently, so that there are no myths or perception about what needs to happen from a growth standpoint.
Fantastic, Nitesh. Thank you for that. We're just about running out of time, but I'll come to Vibha ma'am and then to Mr. Malhotra. Your closing comments, ma'am. Same thoughts, the future outlook. How do you see the EV industry in the next 3 to 5 years?
So my closing comment, therefore, is that, as rightly mentioned, every drop counts. All our actions count. We all are impacted by climate change, and we all contribute to climate change. With 1.15 degrees increase in global temperature, this is what we are facing today. We are trying to stop at 1.5. So therefore, the worst is still to come. But let's not make it 2 degrees. Let's stop as early as possible and reverse the trend. And to reverse this trend, we really have to do every possible step. We want to run cars. That is what it is. Public transport has to be better. And everything. And I would just like to add one more. And we are working on National Center of Green Ports and Shipping. So there, apart from shipping, we are also looking into what kind of trucks should come on the ports. Your ports can't be green with dirty trucks.
So that full circle.
So the whole circle of every activity must be monitored, and we should be conscious of that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Fantastic. Mr. Malhotra, just your closing comments. Same question. How do you see the future roadmap for EVs in India?
I think, as Dr. Vibha just said, it's not just about selling EVs. I think we have to take the whole value chain and see how we produce our cars, what sort of material we use, the recyclability. All those will also play an important role to ensure that the car that we are now producing is produced in the best possible way, it is sold in the best possible way, serviced in the best possible way. So I think that is the starting point. And then, as a country, I think we also need to ensure that we really harness the solar power. And next, let's say 6-7 years, I believe government is working in a very big way to ensure that I think a large chunk, maybe 60-70% of the energy that is produced in India will be through renewable sources. So that should be another milestone in my view. And then I think charging ecosystem, I think Nitesh talked about how many do we need. I think we need to get there. through different initiatives to ensure that we have the right sort of charging infrastructure available in the country, but also utilize the technology. So I think now we have apps. There are different CPOs which are already working. How can we integrate them into one simple, easy, consumer-friendly app which one can really use in a very, very simple way? And that should be in place by that time. And obviously, in my view, as an industry, I believe that auto industry, especially passenger vehicles, 30% should be EV, pure electric cars, and more hybrids should get there. As a company, we have committed that by 2030, we will have somewhere between 90 to 100% electrified cars that we want to sell. And we are very committed to that so that we can achieve our CO2 reduction programs and carbon neutral programs. And I think all this will help us to get there. So we are very committed to that, and we really want to reverse the damage in our small bit that we want to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Malhotra. Thank you, Dr. Dhawan. And thank you, Nitesh, for joining us. This was an invigorating, interesting conversation. And I hope you, as the viewer, are taking back some very important points here today on Volvo Presents Reversing the Damage, Charting India's EV Journey, partnered by ET Now. Thank you so much for watching.